Most people live their entire lives inside invisible walls, and what makes those walls powerful is not their height or strength, but the fact that people never question them. From the moment you are born, you are taught a story about what is possible. You are told there are limits you must not cross, rules you must not break, ceilings you cannot lift. People say things like, "This is just how life works," and because almost everyone agrees, you believe it. You go to school, follow a safe career path, aim for financial security, search for a predictable form of love, and accept that this is the script. But here's the truth. Most of those so-called limits are illusions, and illusions hold power only as long as you don't challenge them. I learned this the hard way. When I started talking about electric cars that could compete with gasoline, people laughed. When I said rockets could be reusable, they told me I was insane. When I spoke about Mars as a place for human settlement, they looked at me as though I was describing a fantasy novel. But what people don't realize is that the difference between the impossible and the inevitable is often just persistence. It's refusing to let the illusion of limits dictate your actions. And this is not just about rockets or cars. It's about life. It's about love. It's about how you design the future you want to live in. If you look around, most of the people who tell you something can't be done have never actually tried. They project their fear onto you. They see their own limits, their own failures, their own unwillingness to risk, and they package it as wisdom. But wisdom that keeps you safe at the cost of your potential is not wisdom at all. It's a cage. The real question you have to ask yourself is this: whose limits are you living by? Your own, tested through action, or someone else's, accepted without resistance? The human brain is an engineering marvel, and like any machine, it responds to inputs. If the input is constant negativity, constant reminders of what's not possible, then your mind will engineer excuses instead of solutions. But if the input is vision, if it is imagination, if it is the relentless pursuit of something that seems out of reach, then your brain starts working like a lab, iterating, testing, adjusting until one day the impossible becomes ordinary. That's how progress happens. That's how every breakthrough in history was born. Think about it. At one point in time, people said heavier than air flight was impossible. They said no human could run a mile under 4 minutes. They said the Earth was the center of the universe. All of those statements were limits, illusions presented as facts. And every single one of them collapsed under the weight of someone's determination to prove otherwise. So, why is it that when it comes to your own life, your own love, your own dreams, you still accept the walls as permanent? Because it's easier. And easy is seductive. Easy tells you to avoid risk, to stay comfortable, to not embarrass yourself by failing publicly. Easy tells you to keep your head down, follow the path, and hope for safety. But here's the problem. Easy never changes the world. Easy never builds anything that lasts. Easy is the enemy of greatness. The walls that surround you are built not of stone, but of assumptions. You assume you can't start a company because you don't have enough money. You assume you can't love deeply because you've been hurt before. You assume you can't chase a dream because people will laugh. But every assumption is a test waiting to be challenged. The way I see it, life is not about avoiding walls. It's about asking, what if the wall is not actually a wall but a door? And if it is locked, what if the lock can be picked? What if the structure itself can be redesigned? That's what engineering has taught me. Problems are rarely as permanent as they look. They are puzzles. They are systems. And systems can be redesigned. If you want a better future, you have to stop asking for permission. Stop waiting for perfect conditions. Stop treating limits as facts. You have to start acting as if every wall is negotiable, because most of them are. Yes, there will be resistance. Yes, there will be failures. But failure is not the enemy. Failure is feedback. Every failed rocket launch taught us something. Every setback gave us data. Without those failures, there would be no Falcon 9 landing gracefully on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean. Without risk, there is no reward. This principle applies to every area of life. In love, people hold back because they are afraid of rejection. They hide their real feelings because they assume it will be too much, too soon, too risky. But hiding is the real risk. Because when you suppress your heart, you kill the possibility of connection before it even starts. If you want extraordinary love, you cannot settle for routine. You have to risk looking foolish. You have to risk being misunderstood. You have to risk tearing down the illusion that love is about comfort when in fact love, like progress, is about courage. In your career, you are told to take the safe job, to climb the corporate ladder, to settle for incremental progress. But if you feel trapped, if you feel like you are wasting your life, that feeling is not a mistake. It's your system screaming at you to break free. Safety is an illusion when it comes at the cost of your purpose. You can fail at something you don't even care about, so why not risk failure on something that lights you up? In the end, the walls are not there to stop you, they are there to test you, to see how badly you want it, to force you to decide if your dream matters enough to face doubt, criticism, and fear. And here's the truth. If it matters enough, you will find a way. That is the first principle of breaking the illusion of limits. Don't take the wall as a final answer. Redesign it, rethink it, reimagine it. Because once you realize that limits are negotiable, you start living a different kind of life. A life not ruled by fear, but by vision. A life not defined by what people say is possible, but by what you decide to attempt. And when you do that, you stop existing inside the script others have written for you, and you start authoring your own. That is when real freedom begins. When people talk about resilience, they often treat it as if it is a personality trait, something you either have or you don't, like eye color or height. But that's not true. Resilience is an engineered system. It's designed, built, and tested over time, forged through failure, refined through pressure, and made reliable through iteration. In my work, I have seen rockets explode, prototypes fail, companies nearly collapse, and entire teams pushed to the edge of burnout. Each of those moments could have been the end. Each of them was an opportunity to say, "This is too hard, let's stop." But stopping is easy, and easy never changes anything. What resilience demands is the willingness to look at disaster not as a dead end but as data, to ask, what does this teach us? How do we rebuild stronger? That is the mindset that turns a crash into a launchpad. And it's the same mindset required to build not just companies, but lives, love, and futures worth fighting for. Most people misunderstand resilience because they confuse it with endurance. They think resilience is simply about surviving, about gritting your teeth and waiting until the storm passes. But resilience is not passive, it's active. It's the ability to adapt, to transform, to redesign yourself while you are under pressure. At SpaceX, when a rocket failed, we didn't just rebuild the same one and hope for better luck. We analyzed every piece of wreckage, every line of code, every microsecond of telemetry. We found the weak points, redesigned them, and built again. That's resilience. Not ignoring the cracks, but reinforcing them. Not pretending the storm isn't real, but building systems that can withstand it. Life works the same way. Love works the same way. Too often, when people face failure in relationships, careers, or personal goals, they assume it's final. They think one bad chapter defines the whole book. But resilience means refusing to let a single moment define you. It means learning to treat failure as feedback, heartbreak as training, obstacles as opportunities to innovate. The truth is, resilience is not something you discover when everything is easy. It's something you construct when everything is falling apart. And here's the paradox. The very moments you think are breaking you are often the moments that are building you. Think of steel. It is weak until it is forged in fire, hammered, cooled, and tested. Without the fire, the hammer, the stress, it never becomes strong enough to build skyscrapers or bridges. Human resilience works the same way. Without trials, without setbacks, without pressure, you never develop the capacity to carry the weight of the future you want. This is why failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is the forge of success. Every failed rocket, every rejected idea, every relationship that didn't last, every sleepless night filled with doubt is not wasted. It's fire-shaping steel. The only wasted failure is the one you don't learn from. Resilience requires humility, the willingness to admit that you don't know everything, that your current design is flawed, that your plan isn't perfect. Most people fail not because they aren't capable, but because they let pride prevent them from adapting. They cling to old systems, old beliefs, old habits, and when the storm comes, they collapse. The key is to stay flexible, to redesign on the fly, to be willing to say, "This isn't working, let's try something else." That's not weakness. That's engineering. When you build rockets, you expect turbulence. You don't panic when a calculation doesn't line up with reality. You recalibrate. You adjust. That's resilience. And in love, the principle is the same. People assume love should be effortless, that if it's right, it will flow without conflict. But that's a myth. Love, like engineering, requires redesign. There will be arguments, misunderstandings, seasons when connection feels strained. Resilience in love means choosing to adapt rather than abandon, to communicate rather than retreat, to forgive rather than calcify into bitterness. It means treating every storm not as a threat, but as a test of strength. If your love can endure pressure, it doesn't just survive, it becomes unbreakable. Building resilience also requires patience. Systems don't become reliable overnight. They need testing, iteration, refinement. People are the same. You don't wake up one morning with resilience. You build it slowly, through every trial, every failure, every comeback. Patience is the hidden component that keeps resilience alive. Without patience, you give up too soon, just before the breakthrough. Without patience, you treat setbacks as verdicts instead of stepping stones. And here's what most people miss. Resilience is not built in the spectacular moments, the dramatic crashes, or public failures. It's built in the quiet choices no one sees. It's built when you keep going after another rejection letter. It's built when you show up to work even when motivation is gone. It's built when you stay committed to love even when feelings fluctuate. Those small daily choices are like bolts and rivets in the structure. They don't look impressive, but they hold everything together when the pressure hits. Resilience also requires vision. If you don't know what you're building toward, resilience feels meaningless. Why endure pain if it has no purpose? Why rise after failure if the goal doesn't matter? At SpaceX, the reason we kept going after failure was not just stubbornness, it was Mars. It was the vision of a future where humanity is multiplanetary. That vision gave meaning to every setback. Without vision, resilience is just suffering. With vision, resilience becomes fuel. The same is true in personal life. If you know what kind of person you want to become, what kind of love you want to build, what kind of legacy you want to leave, then every challenge becomes part of the training. Vision transforms pain into progress. It makes every sacrifice meaningful. It gives you a reason to get back up when the world knocks you down. And perhaps the most important truth about resilience is this: it is contagious. Just as one person's fear can spread and paralyze a team, one person's resilience can inspire and lift everyone around them. When you refuse to give up, when you treat every setback as data instead of defeat, you create an environment where others start to believe the same. Resilience is not just a personal system, it's a cultural system. It builds teams, families, and communities that don't collapse under pressure but grow stronger because of it. So if you want to engineer resilience in your life, stop thinking of it as a trait and start treating it as a design. Build it like you would build a rocket. Expect failure. Study it. Learn from it. Reinforce the weak points. Adapt quickly. Stay patient. Hold to a vision. And remember that resilience is not about avoiding the storm. It's about becoming the kind of structure that can withstand it. Because the storms will come. That's not a possibility. That's a guarantee. The only question is whether you will let them break you or build you. And when you understand that resilience is an engineered system, you realize that you always have a choice. You can choose to quit, or you can choose to build. And the act of choosing, again and again, is what makes you unshakable. Fear is the oldest software in the human brain. It was written into our DNA long before we built cities or rockets, long before we discovered electricity or the internet. Fear once kept us alive. It told us not to step too close to the fire, not to wander into the dark woods alone, not to eat berries that smelled strange. But the problem with fear today is that it is running on outdated code. It still screams danger when there is no real threat, when the risk is not survival but growth. It whispers that you might fail, that you might be embarrassed, that you might lose. And too often, people listen. They treat fear as if it is truth, when in reality, fear is only feedback. It is information. It tells you what matters. The presence of fear is not a signal to stop. It is a compass pointing directly toward the work you need to do. If you are afraid to start a company, it means building that company matters to you. If you are afraid to love again after heartbreak, it means your heart still values connection. If you are afraid to fail, it means the dream is big enough to change you. Fear in this way is not your enemy, it is your map, but most people never learn to read it. They let fear paralyze them, freeze them, hold them back from the very future they say they want. That is why vision matters. Vision is the override code that rewrites fear. Vision is what lets you look at a rocket that exploded 3 times in a row and still say, "We're going to Mars." Vision is what lets you walk into a boardroom where every investor says no and still say, "Electric cars will redefine transportation." Vision is what lets you keep loving, keep building, keep dreaming, even when fear is screaming in your ear. Without vision, fear wins. With vision, fear becomes fuel. I know this because I have lived it. I have felt fear in my body so strongly it was almost paralyzing. Fear that the company would collapse, that we would miss payroll, that failure would not only destroy me but destroy the people who believed in me. I have felt fear in love, fear that I was too flawed, too obsessed with work, too stubborn to build something lasting. I have felt fear in silence, late at night, when doubt feels louder than any rocket launch. But I also know this. Every time I held on to vision, every time I refused to let fear dictate my decisions, I grew stronger. I learned that fear shrinks in the face of forward motion. It cannot survive when you act. Fear is loudest in hesitation. The moment you commit, it begins to fade. Vision makes that possible, because vision is not just a dream, it is a design. It is the ability to imagine a future so compelling that the discomfort of fear becomes small in comparison. When you know where you are going, fear becomes background noise. It is still there, but it no longer controls the mission. Too many people wait for fear to disappear before they act. They think courage means being fearless, but courage has nothing to do with fearlessness. Courage is the decision to act in spite of fear, and vision is what makes that decision possible. You cannot eliminate fear, but you can drown it in purpose. Purpose is louder than fear. Purpose is heavier than doubt. Purpose is the engine that pushes you past hesitation. And here is something most people miss. Fear will always show up at the door of your biggest dreams. If there is no fear, the dream is too small. If you are not scared, you are not stretching. Fear is proof that you are reaching for something beyond your current limits. And that is exactly where growth lives. Think about every breakthrough in history: flying across the Atlantic, splitting the atom, putting humans on the moon. Do you think those people were fearless? Number, they were terrified, but they had vision. They had belief in something greater than their fear, and that belief is what changed everything. Vision does not make fear disappear. It gives you a reason to move forward anyway. This applies not just to companies and missions, but to relationships and personal lives. People avoid love because they fear heartbreak. They avoid risk because they fear rejection. They avoid vulnerability because they fear being misunderstood. And so they live safe but small lives. Vision changes that. When you have a vision for the kind of love you want to build, the kind of family you want to create, the kind of person you want to become, fear loses its grip. You stop asking, "What if I get hurt?" and start asking, "What if I never try?" That shift is everything, because regret is heavier than failure. Regret is fear realized without ever having fought the battle. I would rather fail 1,000 times chasing a vision than live with the weight of knowing I never tried. Vision does not mean you are reckless. It does not mean ignoring risk. It means calculating risk and choosing to step forward anyway. At SpaceX, we never launch a rocket blindly. We simulate, we test, we prepare for failure, but we still launch. If we waited for perfect safety, we would never leave the ground. Life is the same. If you wait until fear disappears, you will wait forever. The launchpad will rust. The opportunity will pass. The dream will fade. You have to launch scared. You have to love scared. You have to live scared, because fear will not vanish. But vision will carry you. Fear is short-term. Vision is long-term. Fear focuses on what could go wrong. Vision focuses on what must go right. Fear magnifies risk. Vision magnifies reward. Fear says, "Stop." Vision says, "Go." And you always get to choose which voice you obey. There is a trick I use when fear feels overwhelming. I zoom out. I ask myself, in 5 years, will this fear matter? In 50 years, will this decision matter? Almost always, the fear becomes small, and the vision becomes large. The things we fear today rarely matter tomorrow, but the things we choose to build, those last. Fear is temporary. Regret is permanent, and legacy is forever. That perspective makes the decision clear. Choose vision. Always choose vision. Because the truth is, fear is not trying to stop you. It is trying to protect you. It is just using an outdated system. It thinks failure is fatal, when in reality, failure is fuel. It thinks rejection will destroy you, when in reality, rejection is redirection. It thinks pain will end you, when in reality, pain will forge you. Vision is the software update. It takes the raw energy of fear and channels it toward growth. It says, "Yes, this is scary, but it is scarier not to try. Yes, this might fail, but it is worse never to begin. Yes, you might get hurt, but the risk is worth the reward. And when you internalize that, fear no longer controls you. You become unstoppable. You realize that the size of your vision must always exceed the size of your fear. If your fear is bigger than your vision, you will shrink. But if your vision is bigger than your fear, you will rise. That is the choice every person must make, every company must make, every relationship must make. Will we live by fear, or will we live by vision? For me, the answer is clear. I will always choose vision, not because I am fearless, but because I am unwilling to let fear write my story. Fear will always knock at the door. Vision decides whether you open it, and the future belongs to those who let vision in. Innovation is not just a process, it is a philosophy, a mindset, a way of life. Most people think innovation belongs in labs or boardrooms or among engineers tinkering with prototypes in hidden facilities, but innovation is not confined to technology. It is not confined to science. It is the act of asking a single question every single day. How can this be better? That question applies to rockets, yes, but it also applies to relationships, to habits, to how you live your life. Innovation is refusing to accept the default settings of the world. It is looking at a gas-guzzling car and asking, what if we built one that didn't need gas at all? It is looking at a rocket that burns up in the atmosphere and asking, what if we could land it, reuse it, and launch again? But it is also looking at your own routines, at the ways you love, the ways you lead, the ways you speak to others and asking, what if I could elevate this, refine this, reinvent this? Innovation is not an event. It is an attitude. The reason people fail to innovate is not because they lack intelligence or resources, it is because they settle. They accept that things are the way they are and always will be. They stop asking the question. They stop seeing possibilities. Children are natural innovators because they question everything. They look at the sky and ask why it is blue. They look at fire and ask why it burns. They look at time and ask why it moves forward. Somewhere along the way, most adults stop asking. They accept, they conform, they obey. Innovation begins when you break that obedience. It begins when you choose curiosity over compliance. The world tells you that this is how things are done, this is how things work, this is the limit. But innovation says limits are just temporary markers, they exist to be moved. I have built companies on this principle. SpaceX exists because I refuse to accept that rockets must be disposable. Tesla exists because I refuse to accept that electric cars must be ugly, slow, and boring. Neuralink exists because I refuse to accept that the human brain must forever be limited to its natural bandwidth. These companies are not just products of technology. They are products of mindset, a mindset that refuses to bow to fear, to doubt, to tradition. But innovation is not only about creating billion-dollar companies, it is about creating a life worth living. It is about looking at your relationships and asking, how can we communicate better? How can we love more deeply? How can we keep our connection alive instead of letting it wither into routine? It is about looking at your daily habits and asking, how can I use my time more wisely? How can I grow instead of stagnate? How can I design my days to reflect my vision instead of drifting through them aimlessly? Innovation is deeply personal. It is the practice of refusing to accept mediocrity in any area of life. The truth is, people resist innovation because it threatens comfort, it forces change, it challenges the known. And change feels like loss. It feels like leaving safety behind. But the irony is that safety is the biggest illusion. Stagnation is more dangerous than change. Routine is more deadly than risk. Because the world is moving whether you innovate or not. The universe does not wait. Markets shift, technology advances, ideas spread. If you stand still, you are not safe. You are falling behind. Innovation is survival, not just for companies, but for individuals. The people who thrive in the future are the ones willing to reinvent themselves over and over again. The ones willing to let go of old versions of themselves to step into new ones. The ones willing to kill their darlings, destroy their comfort zones, and embrace discomfort as the cost of growth. Innovation demands failure. You cannot create anything new without breaking what exists. People ask me how I deal with failure. I say, failure is not opposite to innovation. Failure is innovation. It is the raw data of progress. It is the feedback loop that tells you what doesn't work so you can refine what does. SpaceX failed 3 times before success. Tesla nearly went bankrupt more than once. Neuralink is criticized daily by people who think it is science fiction. But every failure, every criticism, Every setback is part of the process. Innovation without failure is impossible. The only way to avoid failure is to avoid trying. And that is the greatest failure of all. Innovation is not about being right. It is about being relentless. It is about showing up after everyone else has left, staying curious when everyone else has grown cynical, refusing to quit when everyone else has moved on. Innovation is not about genius. It is about grit, about obsession, about the willingness to try one more time, and then one more time after that. The reason innovation matters is not just because it creates new technology. It matters because it redefines what it means to be human. It pushes us forward. It expands our vision of what is possible. It teaches us that nothing is fixed, that every system can be redesigned, that every assumption can be questioned. That is the real gift of innovation. It does not just change machines, it changes minds. And once a mind is changed, the world follows. Imagine if you applied this principle to your own life. Imagine if instead of saying, "This is just the way I am," you asked, "How can I become better?" Imagine if instead of saying, "Relationships always fade," you asked, "How can we innovate the way we love so it grows instead of fading?" Imagine if instead of saying, "I'm stuck in this job forever," you asked, "What new skills, new approaches, new risks can I take to design a career that excites me?" Innovation is not a luxury. It is a necessity. It is how we honor the gift of consciousness, the gift of choice, the gift of imagination. To live without innovation is to live half asleep, trapped in defaults. To live with innovation is to live awake, alive, engaged in the constant redesign of the world around you. The truth is, everyone is an innovator. You do not need to build rockets to innovate. You just need to keep asking the question, how can this be better? That question will change your life. It will change your relationships. It will change your work. It will change the world. Because innovation is not about the size of the problem you tackle. It is about the courage to tackle any problem at all. It is about refusing to look at something broken and walk away. It is about choosing to build, to fix, to create. And the moment you start living that way, you realize that innovation is not separate from love, from vision, from legacy. It is the thread that runs through them all. To innovate is to love enough to improve. To innovate is to see a vision worth building. To innovate is to create a legacy worth leaving. This is the essence of innovation as a way of life. It is not a job. It is not a title. It is not a company. It is a commitment. A commitment to never stop asking, never stop building, never stop daring. Innovation is life refusing to accept limits. It is life insisting on more. And if you embrace it, it will change everything. When I think about the greatest projects I've ever worked on, whether it was launching a reusable rocket, building a car company in an industry where everyone thought it was impossible, or creating a brain-machine interface that people still call science fiction, none of them were ever built alone. They were built with teams, with people who shared a vision, who refused to quit even when the odds were brutal. And that principle applies just as much to personal relationships as it does to world-changing companies. The truth is, the most ambitious project any of us will ever undertake is not a business, not a rocket, not even colonizing Mars. It is the project of building a life with another human being. Relationships are not passive, they are not autopilot, they are not simply about falling in love and then coasting. They are engineering projects of the heart, cathedrals of the spirit that demand resilience, iteration, and constant upgrades. Most people imagine love as a feeling, a spark, a rush, but feelings fluctuate. Sparks fade. The only thing that can make a relationship endure decades is resilience, the same resilience that allows rockets to fly after failures, the same resilience that allows Tesla to survive near bankruptcy, the same resilience that keeps a leader pushing forward, even when everyone says it can't be done. Relationships require that same grit. You will fail. You will argue. You will misunderstand each other. You will face external pressures, finances, careers, family challenges, health issues, the storms of life that nobody can predict. In those moments, the easy thing is to quit, to walk away, to believe that maybe it was not meant to be. But resilience means staying, recalibrating, adapting, and pushing through together. Resilience means seeing conflict not as a wall, but as data, feedback, a test flight that failed, and revealed weaknesses in the design. The strongest couples are not the ones who never fight. They are the ones who fight and then rebuild stronger. They are the ones who treat every challenge as an opportunity to reinforce the foundation, to drive the steel deeper into the bedrock, to make the structure more stormproof. A relationship, like a rocket, cannot survive if it is fragile. It must be engineered to withstand turbulence. and turbulence will always come. What separates those who collapse from those who endure is the daily decision to build together, even in the face of storms. But resilience is not just about weathering problems, it is also about growing through them. It is about refusing to settle for the minimum viable product. Too many couples survive, but they do not thrive. They tolerate each other, but they do not challenge each other to grow. Real resilience is about pushing one another forward, being the co-founder of each other's evolution. It is about saying, I see the best version of you, and I will not let you settle for less. It is about building together in the truest sense, combining strengths, balancing weaknesses, creating something greater than either of you could achieve alone. Think about a team at SpaceX. A designer cannot land a rocket without the engineer who calculates trajectory, without the technician who assembles parts, without the leader who aligns vision. It is the synergy that makes the impossible possible. A relationship is no different. One of you may be the visionary, the dreamer, always pushing for more. The other may be the stabilizer, the anchor, the one who grounds the dream in reality. Together you create balance, momentum, sustainability. Together you become more than the sum of your parts. But for that to happen, there must be trust. Trust is the steel framework. Trust is the confidence that when you launch into the unknown, your partner is there to catch you if you fall, to hold the line when you stumble. Without trust, resilience collapses. Without trust, building together becomes impossible. Trust is not blind. It is forged in repeated choices. It is built when words match actions, when promises are kept, when loyalty is shown in both big crises and small daily moments. It is reinforced when you tell each other the truth, even when it is hard, when you stay honest, even when it would be easier to lie, when you show up, even when it would be easier to disappear. With trust, even silence becomes safe. Without trust, even words become empty. Building a resilient relationship is not about avoiding stress. It is about using stress to grow stronger. Just like muscles grow by tearing and repairing, love grows by facing challenges and healing together. The couples who inspire me most are not the ones who lived easy lives. They are the ones who lost everything and rebuilt. The ones who faced illness, setbacks, betrayals even, but refused to let those storms define them. They chose to define themselves by resilience, by rebuilding, by creating a second draft of their love stronger than the first. That is the kind of relationship I aspire to, the kind that is not fragile glass but tempered steel. Another key to resilience is vision. Couples who endure are couples who share a mission. When life gets hard, when the noise of the world tries to pull you apart, vision keeps you aligned. It reminds you of why you are building together. It gives meaning to sacrifice. It gives context to struggle. A couple without vision is like a rocket without destination. It may launch, but it will drift aimlessly until it falls. A couple with vision has trajectory, momentum, purpose. Every sacrifice becomes fuel for the mission. Every storm becomes training for the journey ahead. Resilience is not about perfection. It is about persistence. It is about waking up every day and choosing each other again. It is about recalibrating when you go off course. It is about humility when pride tempts you to quit. It is about courage when fear whispers that you cannot endure. Love is not the absence of storms. It is the decision to hold hands in the middle of them. Building together is not about avoiding cracks. It is about turning cracks into windows, weaknesses into wisdom, trials into testimonies. The greatest legacy you can build with someone else is not a perfect life. It is a resilient life. A life that tells the world, yes, storms came, yes, we stumbled, yes, we failed, but we kept building. We kept choosing. We kept creating something greater than ourselves. That is resilience. That is partnership. That is love engineered not for comfort, but for endurance. Leadership is often glamorized as standing on a stage, giving a speech, or being celebrated for victories, but the truth is leadership feels much more like carrying a weight that few others can imagine. It is sleepless nights, relentless pressure, the knowledge that every decision ripples through hundreds or thousands of lives, and the reality that failure is not just personal, it can affect entire teams, entire industries, even the trajectory of humanity. I have lived with that weight for decades, from the moment I decided to risk everything on rockets that exploded, on cars nobody wanted, on ideas most experts laughed at. And I can tell you that leadership is not about charisma, it is about responsibility. It is about owning outcomes even when they are ugly, even when they are unfair, even when they break you. Responsibility is not glamorous. It is the willingness to be the one people blame, the one people criticize, the one people doubt, while still moving forward. When rockets fail, my name is in the headline. When a Tesla crashes, it is my face on the news. When a project slips behind schedule, it is my reputation that takes the hit. And that is how it should be. If you want the glory of leadership, you must be willing to shoulder the responsibility of failure. Too many leaders want credit without consequence, but true leadership is the opposite. It is taking more blame than you deserve and sharing more credit than you should. That is the weight of vision. The vision itself is the spark, the impossible picture of a future that does not yet exist. Vision is what makes people follow you in the first place, what gives them a reason to endure long hours, low pay, and constant setbacks. But vision alone is fragile. It collapses without discipline. It crumbles without responsibility. A leader who dreams but does not deliver is not a leader, they are a fantasist. Vision requires structure, execution, resilience. It requires turning abstract hope into concrete results, brick by brick, test flight by test flight, iteration by iteration. I have learned that leadership is not about being the smartest person in the room. It is about creating a room where the smartest ideas can win, even if they do not come from you. It is about fostering a culture where people are not afraid to fail, because they know failure is not the end, but the beginning of progress. It is about setting a bar so high that others call you insane, and then refusing to lower it even when you fall short, because you know the only way to reach Mars is to aim for Mars, not for mediocrity. Leadership means living with constant tension between vision and reality, between what is possible and what is practical. Every day, I am pulled between the big picture and the tiny detail, between the dream of a multiplanetary civilization and the immediate problem of a valve that leaks or a battery that overheats. And the truth is, both matter equally. If you ignore the small things, the big things fail. If you ignore the big vision, the small things become meaningless. Balancing that tension is the essence of responsibility. It is the reason leadership is so exhausting and so rare. Responsibility also means making choices that are unpopular. A true leader cannot live for applause. If you live for applause, you will avoid the hard calls, you will compromise your mission to keep people happy, and in the end, you will achieve nothing. Leadership sometimes means laying off people you care about because survival depends on it. It sometimes means launching a rocket that you know might fail because waiting would mean the company dies. It sometimes means telling the world, we are not there yet, when everyone is demanding results. These choices hurt. They weigh on you long after the press conference ends. But they are the price of leadership. Responsibility means carrying those scars so others don't have to. But let me tell you something crucial. Leadership is not just about external projects. It is also about the people closest to you. If you cannot lead at home, if you cannot take responsibility for your relationships, your family, your children, then no amount of rockets or cars will matter. The weight of vision must be balanced with the weight of presence. It is not enough to change the world if you neglect the people you love. Leadership begins with responsibility in the smallest circle, then expands outward. If you fail in that circle, everything else collapses eventually. The same principles apply: vision, trust, resilience, communication. A leader in love and family does not dictate. They inspire. They do not escape when storms come. They anchor. They do not pursue only their own dreams. They align dreams with their partner, their family, their community. That is leadership in its most human form. And just like building rockets, it requires iteration, humility, and responsibility. Leadership is also lonely. This is something few talk about. Everyone sees the team, the public moments, the celebrations, but leadership is filled with silence. At 3 a.m., when a mission fails, it is the leader who sits alone staring at data, wondering if the dream is collapsing. When criticism pours in, it is the leader who absorbs it first. When fear whispers, it is the leader who must pretend courage until courage becomes real again. This loneliness is the cost of responsibility, and if you are not willing to pay it, you should not lead. But loneliness also forces clarity. It strips away illusions. It makes you confront yourself, your values, your why. And when you emerge from that, you lead with authenticity that no performance can fake. Authenticity is the final ingredient of leadership. People will follow you through hell if they believe you are real. They will endure failure after failure if they trust that your commitment is genuine, that your vision is not a gimmick but a mission you would stake your life on. Authenticity comes not from pretending to be perfect, but from admitting when you are not, from owning mistakes, from being transparent even when it hurts. That is why I speak so openly about failures, about rockets exploding, about times I nearly went bankrupt. People don't need a flawless hero. They need a human being who refuses to quit. That is what leadership is: not perfection, but persistence. And so when I talk about leadership, responsibility, and the weight of vision, I want you to understand this. It is not a crown you wear, it is a burden you carry. It is not applause, it is accountability. It is not about being in charge, it is about being responsible for outcomes. The reward is not comfort, it is meaning. And if you choose it, if you shoulder that weight with courage and humility, you will discover that leadership is not about building rockets or companies. It is about building people, building resilience, building futures. That is the real work. That is the real mission. And it is worth every ounce of the weight. Innovation is often celebrated as a spark of genius, a single light bulb moment that changes the course of history, but the truth is far less glamorous and far more demanding. Innovation is not about sudden flashes of brilliance. It is about relentless iteration, about being willing to fail more times than anyone else, about staring at the impossible until it bends under the weight of persistence. People often ask me how I came up with the idea of reusable rockets or electric cars that outperform gas vehicles or tunnels under cities, and they imagine I sat in a room and had a eureka moment. But the reality is that innovation was born out of frustration, necessity, and a refusal to accept the so-called limits that everyone else treated as immovable. The core of innovation is refusing to take reality at face value, refusing to believe that the way things are is the way they must always be, and asking the most dangerous question of all, what if? What if rockets didn't have to be thrown away like trash after every launch? What if cars could be fun, fast, and electric at the same time? What if we could colonize Mars not in the distant future but within our lifetime? These what if questions are where innovation begins, but they are also where failure becomes inevitable. Because the moment you step outside the accepted box, you enter a landscape filled with mistakes, with errors, with crashes and burns. And the willingness to embrace that, to not just tolerate failure, but to see it as the price of progress, is what separates true innovation from mere ideas. I have watched rockets explode in fireballs. I have watched Tesla teeter on the edge of bankruptcy. I have endured ridicule from experts who said this is impossible, this will never work, this is a waste of time. And every one of those moments of failure was not the end. It was data, it was feedback, it was the raw material of innovation. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is the forge of success, the crucible that burns away illusions and reveals what actually works. Too many people are paralyzed by the fear of failing, but I can tell you with certainty that the only true failure is refusing to try, refusing to take risks, refusing to step into the unknown. Innovation is about living in that unknown, making peace with uncertainty, and continuing to move forward when you have no guarantee of victory. The process of innovation is brutal. It demands resources, time, energy, and most of all, resilience. It will break you if your vision is weak. It will crush you if you are doing it for applause. But if you are doing it because you believe deeply that the future must be different, that humanity deserves more, that there is no other option but progress, then the pain of failure becomes fuel. Every setback becomes a reason to push harder, to refine, to try again. This is why I always say that being an innovator is less about IQ and more about stamina, less about brilliance and more about persistence. Anyone can dream, but very few will keep dreaming after their vision explodes in their face again and again. That is the price of redefinition. And yet, when you persist, when you refuse to quit, you eventually reach the point where the impossible becomes the new normal. Think about reusable rockets. For decades, experts said it was impossible, too dangerous, too expensive, too complex. Today it is routine, boosters landing back on Earth with precision that once seemed like science fiction. That is innovation, turning yesterday's impossibility into tomorrow's baseline. The same will happen with electric vehicles, with sustainable energy, with multiplanetary life. It is not magic. It is iteration, persistence, failure, and vision combined. But innovation is not just for engineers or CEOs. Innovation is a mindset, a way of living, a refusal to accept that your life must stay the way it is, simply because that is how it has always been. The same principles apply to relationships, to careers, to personal growth. If you are willing to ask what if you are willing to risk failure in pursuit of something greater, you are innovating. And just like with rockets, failure in your personal journey is not the end. It is data, it is feedback, it is the blueprint for the next attempt. Innovation requires courage because it demands that you redefine the possible, not just for yourself, but for everyone who comes after you. When you innovate, you create a new reality that others can step into. You make the road where there was no road. You light a fire where there was only darkness. You prove that limits are temporary, that boundaries are illusions, that impossible is just another word for unattempted, and in doing so, you expand the horizon of humanity itself. That is why I innovate, not for money, not for fame, but because I believe the future is a canvas waiting to be painted, and innovation is the brush. Failure is just the texture of the canvas, the roughness that makes the picture real. And if you embrace that, if you keep painting, you will eventually create something extraordinary. So, here's the truth. Innovation is not easy, it is not glamorous, it is not safe, but it is necessary. It is the only way humanity moves forward. It is the only way you move forward. And if you have the courage to fail, the courage to persist, the courage to redefine what is possible, then you will not just live in the future, you will create it.